I'm joined now by CEO of Finance with Muktar, Mohammed, to review some of our top stories in a lot more detail. Muktar, good morning to you. It's great to have you here on the show. How are you today?
Great.
Very well. All right, let's begin with Dangote Refinery's crude production set to begin in 2025. What can we make of this?
Good news.
Really good news.
But again, good news with the board, because we don't know how much they will be able to produce in terms of crude. It's been back and forth between Dangote and the NNPC in terms of how much crude goes to Dangote Refinery. I think this could be a game changer, but we've always talked about game changer. This could be a game changer, and at the end of the day, it doesn't change. But I think when they start producing their own crude, that could also be a very big plus for them, coupled with what they will get from NNPC and others. So for me, it's good. Maybe finally, the government have already said subsidy is gone, and we are beginning to see a lot of new things coming up. And I think what we're waiting for is to see more investments in those areas whereby we don't have only Dangote, we have other refinery comes into play, and they also will be producing crude. For me, I still think that the key game changer in this whole of issues will be NNPC Nigeria Limited. And so that's why I'm still waiting for them to get their refinery. They have to get a refinery, because sometimes it's assault when you realize that a big player like the NNPC that have all the infrastructure to move refined petroleum product to any part of this country with the kind of petroleum network they have are not yet a player in that sector, and just a new player building a refinery, and they are still moving it through the water course. And NNPC has the facility to move crude from Port Harcourt to as far as Sokoto State, and this without going through tanks and using the trucks and everything. This could also bring down costs, but that comes with a cost, because a lot of these pipelines, we don't know what has happened to them. So I think it's good that Dangote is doing that, but again, it will be better when you have other players coming.
Oh, absolutely. And, that's a point that it's really a sore point, what you just mentioned with the NNPCL, and we hope, that this will sooner than later become something that we can call a thing of the past. But before we move on to the next topic, so there's a public expectation that Dangote's crude production, for 2025, will then decrease the price of PMS. Could you just educate the public around the
I think that should have happened. Yeah. I mean, reality, that shouldn't happen, because again, it's market determination, market forces, exchange rates, then again coupled with cost of production, also coupled with international price. But why people like us were optimistic about the change is because of what the president said. The president said in his broadcast that NNPC will supply crude to Dangote Refinery, and Dangote will pay in Naira. And this is the one that nobody's been talking about, at a fixed exchange rate, which means it will not be 1,600 today, be 1,700 tomorrow. And for people like us, we thought that fixed exchange rate will be what you think is the true value of the exchange rate of the Naira to the dollar. That is the only way you can bring down this price. So every other talk of, we do this, it's not going to work, because when you have that exchange rate volatility, and coupled with the data that was released that said 40% of the pressure between the Naira and the dollar is largely driven by importation of refined petroleum product. We all felt that when you remove 40% of that pressure of the Naira, then the Naira will need to stabilize, and then the Naira will need to come down, because again, it boils down to demand and supply. But the challenge with the exchange rate, I keep saying, is not from the autonomous foreign exchange market. It's from the retail side. That small SME guy that need $1,000, that person that need $500, even those person that need $200 to just transact business online. We have not been able to address liquidity in the retail state. And that is supposed to be driven by the banking sector and also the bureau de change. So once those sectors are not really key players, CBN is not looking at those sectors at the moment, as far as I'm concerned, as key player in terms of pumping liquidity into those sectors, you continue to see those volatility. And once those volatility comes, then it has a ripple effect. And that ripple effect is what we see, that the price of crude cannot go down because of this exchange. So the game changer, tell us how much you're giving Dangote. Is it fixed? What is the exchange rate? What is the cost? That's just it.
The big questions. Well, until we get answers to those, we all have to manage our expectations. So let's look next at the IMF slashing borrowing cost by 36%.
That's good news for Sub-Saharan Africa.
This is really good news.
For me, as far as I'm concerned, that is more or less like debt forgiveness that we've been crying for.
It's really a write-off.
36% is huge. And when you look at developing countries, especially African countries, coming away from COVID. We've borrowed so much from IMF. You talk about Kenya, you talk about maybe South Africa is not there. You talk about Ghana, you talk about even Nigeria.
Yeah.
So that percentage, 36%, is huge. And if you say that's more or less like a debt forgiveness, but again, that is also tied. And IMF tells you some of these things. They don't tell you the nitty-gritty of it.
That's what I want to talk about. What are
certain parameters that is not, you don't know until they start begin to disclose it to you. It's either you are doing one of their policies, and when you look at IMF, World Bank policy, have they really impacted positively to the African economy? I don't think so.
That's a debatable question. Not here, but I'm sure that.
No, you look at Ghana. Ghana says you look at Ghana. How much have you look at Kenya? How much has it impacted? You look at some of the major economy in Africa. How much have the IMF policy really drive their growth? If you look at study those economies, you realize that most of the growth are indigenous growth. The government decide to look at it and say, you know what? How can we drive this with our own indigenous policies? How can we help our peasant farmers? How can we help people in the rural area? How can we have our people who have access to credit? This has been the key driver of every major economic success in Africa, not necessarily the IMF or World Bank policy.
So you see a mere smoke screen here.
I see a more
closer. Look a little closer.
We will get closer to know what are those parameters that will qualify you to have that 36%.
Right, but I mean, when we look at this, slash, what about the charges and the surcharges? Do they remain?
That's what I'm saying. It's not clear yet. Right. You just said 36%, but I think the government and most other government that are will collected some of these loans will be doing those calculations, will be having those conversations behind the scene. But hopefully they will give us clearer picture on what that will entail. Right,
so something's got to give. Well, let's look next as Nigeria's federal government proposing a 25% rate cut. So, Muktar, it's not a good time to be wealthy, right?
Well, it depends.
Okay.
It depends because again, for me, I think I have to say the best economic reform committee that we have at the moment is the tax reform committee. They've been ticking the right button. We must give it to Taiwo Oyedele. They have done the right thing. They look at tax as a means of growing the economy. They look at tax as a means of reducing burden on smaller business. Then they look at tax as a way of driving revenue for government. If you look at all their policies, these are the three major things they are driving on. If you look at other tax policy we've had thus far, it's all about revenue. But this seems to be saying, look, smaller business need to grow. They are the engine room of the economy. We need to give them a breather. Now they came to the rich. I think the only thing that he didn't say right, for me, I don't think the rich in Nigerians are not paying taxes. I think he didn't want to hit the nail on because most of this is what he's wanting to do will go to the National Assembly. I think those that are not paying taxes are the politicians. We need to ask them. They are the ones not paying taxes. You see them sometimes ministerial clearance. You see the kind of amount of tax. You see there was a time that the minister tax was about 70,000 in a year. I mean, so for me, this is more or less to the political class. For the wealthy, yes, you want to pay tax. But you want to see how that tax will improve security so that you can move freely. That's how it's done in developed world. They collect from the wealthy to improve security because if you are wealthy and security is not there, how can you move freely in the street? You are being attacked by armed robbers, you're being attacked by bandits. No, you don't want that. So if those taxes are going to be used to provide security, social investment, health care, because you as the wealthy, you employ a lot of people and you want them to go to government hospital rather than going to private hospital, which is more expensive. So in a way, it's a win-win situation for the wealthy people in Nigeria because I can categorically say the wealthy people in Nigeria, but rather maybe 80% of them pay taxes because you just need to they know that you're a high net investor. You just need to know how this tax office comes after them. Go as far as the account hitting them, you must pay this tax. So for me, I think they must put more searchlight on the politician because we don't know how much the National Assembly is receiving. We don't know how much. They said if you earn about 1.5 million monthly, and we know the National Assembly earn more than 1.5 million monthly. So we are waiting.
Well, that's another one, Muktar. I mean, of course, if you were in that current tax bracket, it was 19%.
You see, when you look at 19%, 19% to 25%, have your wealth improved?
True. That's valid.
That's valid. So if your wealth has improved, 4% is nothing so much. It's only that in those areas now, the only clean that people is not looking at is most of the companies, most of the jobs are provided by the wealthy. So is it going to, when you increase my taxes, am I going to increase my goods and services too?
Yes, I mean, of course, you want to make those payments, but what is coming out of this? And of course, you also asked a very big question. We were going to have to wait for answers for that one. Muktar, I want to thank you. We've run out of time, unfortunately, but we'll have to continue this conversation another time. Thank you.